Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 145, I chat with AV journalists Brent Butterworth, Chris Heinonen, and Grant Klauser about all that we saw and heard at CES 2013. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded January 21st, 2013. Episode 145, CES Wrap-Up. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly. All streamed directly to you, saving you time, money, and hassle. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek. This week, we're going to be wrapping up CES. I've got three journalists on the panel today who are going to be talking about what we saw and what we heard at the mega show in Vegas last week. First up is Brent Butterworth, a contributing technical editor at Sound and Vision at soundandvisionmag.com. Hey, Brent, your first time on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be on.
And that's even from a remote location. You're normally in California, but today you're in Texas. So the wonders of the internet and Skype.
Longhorn skiers near me.
Sorry? Get out of here!
Sorry.
No problem. No problem at all. Okay. Next up is Chris Heinonen, a senior editor, one of several, at Secrets of Home Theater and High Fidelity at hometheaterhifi.com. Chris, your second appearance on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
And finally, another first-timer for us, Grant Klauser, let's see, what is your title, Grant? I've forgotten. A technology editor.
Technology editor, right.
Technology editor at Electronic House magazine, and that's at electronichouse.com. Welcome.
Yep. Thank you very much.
So glad for all of you to be here. And of course, as always, I'm looking at the chat room as we go here. So if you have any questions for us, please post them in the chat room if you're watching live at live.twit.tv. The chat room, of course, is irc.twit.tv. And I'll pass along as many as I can as we go. So CES has come and gone. It was my 21st. Let's see. Brent, you must have been going for about that long, haven't you?
24.
24 for you. Grant, how about you?
15.
I'm sorry?
15.
15, okay. And Chris, how about you?
Just 2.
Oh, you're the newbie of the bunch.
Yes.
Still in all, you all know how impressive it is. Anybody who's watching, who's been to the show, knows how amazing it is. 150,000 plus people show up. From what I hear, most of the locals in Vegas take that week off because it gets so crowded and the cabs are all busy and the monorail is jammed and so on and so forth. But, you know, we're there to schmooze up the people we don't see except that time of year and take a look at the new products. Now, one of the things that I've heard a number of times about this show was that people seem to think it's starting to get irrelevant, that there's really no need for it anymore, and it's kind of on its way out. I don't agree. It was the largest attendance ever, the largest, the most exhibit space ever. And there were plenty of things to cover. I mean, I couldn't cover them all. I don't think any of you could or anybody could. Brent, what do you think? Is CES still relevant?
I think it's more relevant than ever. It's a lot of people forget this is not a show that's such a big thing for big tech announcements, and really there weren't that many at this show. The important thing is this is a trade show. This is where deals get done. This is where people interact and network. see new products, show their dealers new products, and really interact in a way they can't anywhere else in the whole world. And so, I've heard a lot of people say, well, Apple doesn't attend, and big tech announcements get made all during the year now. But I think it doesn't make any difference. This was a huge show. You couldn't possibly see all of it. You couldn't possibly see everything just within your own specialty, much less everything. So I think it's really important.
I tend to agree. Grant, are you in line with us here?
Yeah, well, I mean, judging from the turnout, it's clearly still significant because CEA is already saying that this was a record turnout. But I think the significance may have changed. When it started, and for many years, it was a show for retailers to go and see what's new and place their orders of what they're going to buy, to sell in their stores for the next year. And we know that doesn't happen so much. The retailers still go, but there are less retailers than there used to be, and so I think there's a lot of other things going on, lots of sub-conferences going on within, and people doing other kinds of business rather than just the dealers going in and marking down how many TVs they're going to order for next year. Plus, it's the biggest cheerleading show for the industry, in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Chris, what was your overall impression about the relevance or importance of CES this year?
I feel it's still relevant, if only because you get to see and communicate with lots of people that you otherwise wouldn't see for the rest of the year. So most of the companies that I work with or PR people that I talk to all the time, I can't put a name to a face if it wasn't for CES or CEDIA. And so I think more than anything, it can be a networking show beyond just seeing the products with your own eyes at, in 1 week, being able to see everything instead of having it spread out over a year or not seeing things you would never see otherwise.
I have to agree. That, and Leo Laporte has made this point, that tech announcements and new product announcements and so on can be made online, and that's perfectly fine. The primary exception to that is seeing new televisions, because you can't, judge those in any way by press releases or whatever, but you really can see them at the show. But for me, the most important part of CES, beyond the new products and technologies and announcements and so on, is the FaceTime that I get with people that I don't see other times of the year, except possibly CEDIA, which is in September. So 2 times a year, I get to actually be face-to-face in the same room with people that I work with all year long. And I find that to be probably the most important thing for me. Well, we're already getting a couple of questions in the chat room. And one of them from Victorio is asking about audio-related news. And we're going to get to that, Victorio. Just hang on for a second, because I wanted to start with the most obvious thing that we saw at the show, everybody saw there, was 4K, or to be more precise, UHD, Ultra HD, which is exactly 4 times the resolution of current HD. So current HD is 1920 pixels across by 1080 pixels down. Ultra HD, or UHD, is 3840 pixels across by 2160 pixels down. That's exactly twice the horizontal resolution and twice the vertical resolution, which gives you 4 times the number of pixels than consumer HD. Now, this is UHD is what we might also call consumer 4K, and this is where there's a lot of confusion, because a lot of companies are talking about this consumer version and calling it 4K, whereas the commercial cinema is also using the term 4K to refer to 4096 pixels across by 2160 down. And the reason that the two differ is because in commercial cinemas, 2K, which is what we see now when we go to a digital cinema, is 2048 across by 1080 up and down. So they're exactly doubling that for 4K. Same in the consumer space. They're exactly doubling horizontal and vertical resolution to give us the same aspect ratio, 16:9, and exactly 4 times the number of pixels than we have in current HD. So my question for you guys, and I'll start with Chris. You saw a bunch of 4K or UHD everywhere. What was your overall impression? Is this something that's going to be important coming in the years to come?
I think UHD is going to be important, but I actually think it's for a reason different than the actual resolution itself. Because the ITU has put out their draft specification now, which is called Rec 2020, much like Rec 709 was for HDTV.
Are you talking about the colors? You're talking about the color gamut here.
Yes. So beyond the fact that it can do higher resolution, which some of us can't see because of how far away we sit from our TVs, UHD is going to allow for a much bigger color gamut that gives us shades of red, green, and blue that we can't see now. So there's like really rich aqua colors you'll see in oceans when you go on a trip to Hawaii or the Bahamas. Your TV can't do that, but UHD is going to allow that. But that's one of the reasons I was a little disappointed this year, is that none of the UHD sets out there were supporting this wider gamut. They weren't supporting the 120 frames per second that the UHD spec allows. Their HDMI hasn't caught up yet, so UHD can't do beyond 30 frames a second. So if you watch Sony's soccer clip, the soccer ball is a little juddery in the air because usually sports are 60 frames a second, and this was down to 30. And so I think UHD is important, but I also think that some of the technological sides of it haven't caught up to the resolution yet. And so people buying now are somewhat buying a HDTV that doesn't have HDCP support at this point.
Chris, what do you think? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Grant. my apologies, Grant.
That's okay. I agree with a lot of what Chris said. My feeling is that compared to what we've seen over the past couple years at CESs and a new TVs coming out, 4K is a lot more important than, say, 3D was 2-3 years ago, because 3D was a gimmick and 4K is an actual technological advancement of what can happen on the panel. You've got more pixels, and I think the people complain about the content. That's going to catch up, and it's my guess it's going to catch up a lot sooner than people believe. We've already got Sony talking about later this year an internet delivery system. So it's going to happen quickly, and also if it gets people to buy bigger TVs, whoever complained that they bought a TV that was too big?
Well, a couple of people have. I've only heard a couple people. Most of the time, I agree with you. People that I talk to, consumers, think they're getting a TV of the right size. They get it home and they live with it for a while and they end up saying, yeah, I should have gotten a bigger one. That's generally true. And you're right. 4K certainly does make larger screens more viable in terms of you can't see the pixels. And again, it all depends on your seating distance. Well, so there is that correlation between screen size and seating distance. But 4K, one of its advantages certainly is that it lets you sit a lot closer, despite your mother's warning that you'll go blind, which I don't believe, that than you can with standard HD. And now I'm starting to call HD standard. It's like It's almost like standard definition. Brent, what was your overall impression of UHD or 4K at the show?
Well, some of the demos I saw were pretty impressive, but I have real questions about whether this is something that's going to get people excited about buying new TVs. If you look at what actually makes a difference and what you can actually see, if you have screen size of say 60 inches or something like that, you probably can't see the difference between 4K and 2K. And demoing this in the store is going to be hard to do. Certainly with TV sets that are, some of the new 84-inch models that are coming out, yeah, sure, that'll make a difference. But even then, gosh, regular old 2K sets that are 60 inches look amazing right now. And talking people into 4 times the resolution is going to be, I think, a little bit tough. And it may be one of those features that the TV manufacturers end up sort of giving away because they all go ahead and do it. And that's what they make now, so...
Well, certainly this was true of 3D, and I wanted to mention this as well, that at 3D, I heard a lot of, as far as that's concerned, I heard a lot of people at the show saying, oh, 3D is dead, no one's talking about it, except LG, of course, which had that massive 3D video wall at the entrance to their booth. But I disagree with that because 3D has moved beyond being a gee-whiz factor to just sort of being part of the TV. I admit that a lot of people don't like it. They don't use it, but it's there and it's going to stay. Studios are still making 3D content. And it's part of just about every TV, at least midline and high-end TVs you can buy these days. So it's not that it was dead. It was just not shouted from the rooftops as being the next big thing, because it's already here and it's already entrenched. Grant, what do you think about 3D at the show? Hello, Grant.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. So
Yeah.
what was your impression of 3D? Did you think it looked dead at the show?
Well, it certainly wasn't discussed. It wasn't emphasized. You know, people weren't showing off, hey, look at our great 3D part of our TV. It was other things in the television.
Right.
The OLED technologies, which I think are really marvelous, and some of the changes in smart TV platforms, particularly Samsung's use of those panels and the way that they integrate your cable box subscription, that makes your TV interface integrated in the way that, say, your iPad or your tablet or your smartphone interface is all sort of categorized and personalized. I think those are good, but the 3D part, no, people weren't talking about it, and I think the blame for that largely goes on the content. 3D content just hasn't been all that exciting. I mean, I like watching The Hobbit in 3D, sort of, in a theater, but I wouldn't care to bother with watching it in 3D in my home.
Okay, Chris, what do you think?
I am really not a big fan of 3D. I'll fully admit that. Usually most of the active ones give me a headache and I stop watching pretty quickly. But that's one place that 4K actually helps out, is because you can do passive 3D that has the full HD resolution. So that's the one thing that I see as a big benefit for 4K, is it might make 3D more acceptable if you can do it with passive glasses, don't have the headaches, and it's just easier to sit back and watch. But I'm still not a big fan of it myself.
I happen to agree that I prefer 3D passive glasses, or even now glasses free. This is one thing about 3D that we did see at the show. There were at least 2, probably 3 demonstrations that I saw, or were aware of anyway, of glasses free 3D. Did you guys happen to catch those? Brent, what about you? Did you catch the glasses free 3D? And if so, what'd you think?
I saw one of them. Don't ask me where it was. I can't remember. And it was kind of, I thought it was, you know, from a technological standpoint, it's impressive. I was slightly amazed to see that they could do it, and that it had a pretty good, you know, viewing angle. I could move around and still see it at different angles. But you know, it didn't. I looked at it, and I was with somebody, probably, I don't know, Jeff Morrison or somebody, my fellow blogger on Sound and Vision, and looked at it and said, you know, it doesn't look that much better than just a real good 2D picture, you know, which a good 2D HD picture has a lot of depth to it. So I hate to be the wet blanket here.
That's all right. I have no trouble with you being the wet blanket. Well, I saw what you did, Brent. What you saw, was that on the main show floor?
It was.
Okay, then it was probably from a company called Stream TV Networks, and it was a technology called Ultra D. And I'm planning to have the developer on the show at some point. He's in Holland, actually, so the time difference is a little weird. But if he's willing to stay up late for him, then I'm going to have him on the show to talk more about the technology that's involved there. It's actually pretty interesting. I talked to him at some length about it. And there was also the Dolby 3D system, which is not brand new. I saw it at NAB last April. And those of you who went to the Venetian, I didn't make it to the Venetian because I got sick, might have seen it there too. We're going to talk about the Venetian in a minute. Somebody in the chat room here, Eric Duckman, mentioned another advantage of 4K that I didn't want to let pass, which is 4 times PIP. That is, you can split a 4K screen into 4 images, and they'll all be 1920 by 1080, which seems pretty nice to me. It means no scaling of HD signals in all those 4. And certainly, though, you would need, 4 tuners to do that. But, modern DVRs from Dish and DirecTV and maybe even some cable companies certainly have 4 tuners that you can record 4 different things at once, so it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. Beatmaster in the chat room is asking, what about the CBS CNET issue? CNET offered one of its best of CES awards to the Dish Network Hopper with its commercial skipping feature, and CBS put pressure on them, and since CNET, as far as I know, is a subsidiary or a property of CBS, they kind of backed off and started a firestorm. Chris, did you have any thoughts on that particular issue?
Yeah, so I've talked about this with a couple friends, and I agree it's a bad thing that happened, of course, but I'm not totally sure how CNET was supposed to handle it once CBS came down and gave them the directive that, no, you can't give the award. I mean, their whole staff could have resigned, and that wouldn't have prevented CBS from canceling the award. And they might have just appointed a new editor that would be more willing to toe the CBS corporate line and say, you'll, give awards to who we say to, and that's going to be what you do. I think the issue just had never come up before of what do we do if we give an award to someone that our corporate parent is currently suing over that product? And so I'm hoping what they and everyone else will do is put together some sort of agreement going forward to say, look, this is the reasons that we can't review a product potentially. We'll make all the readers aware of it and try to avoid this. But they also could have been more transparent at the start. Instead of just dropping Dish from consideration, they could have said, look, corporate came down and said, since we're in litigation, for legal reasons, we can't give the award. But I mean, it was kind of the cover up at the beginning that led to some of the issue, I think.
Yeah. Grant, what was your impression of that whole situation?
Well, I understand the reasons all for it, and it made them look pretty lousy. My question was, and this isn't any diss against the Hopper, is why that was selected in the first place. It's a year-old product with basically a firmware update. They added Slingbox, which is cool and it's great, but does that make it the best of show in a show with 2,000 other product announcements? I think no. I think it was a bad selection for a completely different reason.
That's a very good point. Hopper is a year old. They introduced it last year, and as you say, it's a firmware update. So why give the big thing about it? I think the Hopper. Now here's the question. I don't know this. Last year, when the Hopper was first introduced, did it have this commercial skipping feature? Brent, do you know?
Mid-year. That came mid-year.
Oh, that came mid-year. Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't announced last year, but it did come before CES. And so, the commercial skipping, though, of course, is the bugaboo. Brent, did you have anything to add to this?
Well, I think it's just one of those unfortunate situations where I'm sure it was impossible for CNET to predict this would happen. It was impossible for CBS to do anything else since they're in litigation. It's just, a lot of the people that run around, slinging arrows at CNET for this are the same people that, criticize everything that reviewers do and journalists do. And no matter what you do as a reviewer, a journalist, whatever, you're going to get a lot of criticism for things that sometimes fair and sometimes not.
Yeah, good point. Lawn Dog in the chat room is saying something that I've heard many people say, which is that 4K and 8K, which we saw in the Sharp booth, we've seen that for now a couple of years, and NHK, the Japanese broadcaster, is experimenting with it, look so dimensional that you really don't need 3D. And Brent, this goes to your point that you were talking with Jeff about at the show, which is, looking at the glasses free 3D. Well, it doesn't look that much better than, a good HD signal. And I've heard plenty of people say, and I think myself, that when you look at a good 4K image with native 4K content, by the way, or 8K even more so, that it does have more dimensionality to it. And maybe 3D is less pronounced on such a set than it would be in 1920. Does this reflect things that you've heard as well, Brent?
I can't say it's reflecting anything I've heard, but it's something that I've felt myself. Is, the more resolution you have, the more the picture looks 3D, regardless of what you do to it. So, to me, 3D becomes less and less necessary the more resolution you have. Honestly, where 3D really paid off with some in the old 480i NTSC signals. And then, then it made a big difference, and it really looked spectacular. But once you start raising the resolution, you get so much more depth that you kind of don't need it. And from a storytelling standpoint, 4K and 8K definitely do not get in the way. They only improve things, and whether or not 3D improves the storytelling is, unless you're James Cameron, probably it doesn't.
James Cameron or Peter Jackson, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other big display news that I wanted to, well, two other pieces of display news before we move on. One is OLED. Now, we saw OLED last year from LG and Samsung, and they both said it was a 55-inch display, and it was, it's going to be shipping this year, later this year, end of the year. Well, it didn't. LG announced that they've actually started shipping it in other countries, and it will start shipping in the U.S. in March. A 55-inch TV for $12,000. Samsung this year at 2013 CES wouldn't even tell me a model number, a ship date, or a price. So they're at exactly the same spot as they were last year. Now, we also saw a 4K OLED from Sony and Panasonic, but these were technology demonstrations, and I doubt we're going to see, they certainly didn't announce product availability or pricing or anything. But Chris, what's your hit on the whole OLED thing? Are we ever going to see big screen OLED TVs, or is it just too hard to make them, too expensive?
Well, the big difference between the LG and the Samsung is LG is using a white LED with a color filter array on top of that, whereas Samsung is trying to do red, green, and blue OLEDs themselves, and blue OLEDs have a lifespan issue. So they're probably having issues producing those en masse that last long enough that somebody will feel good about paying $12,000 for a TV. I think they will eventually come out at some sort of form. I mean, productions have gotten very good for smartphones and for other smaller forms of OLEDs, whereas before those were much more limited, and now we see them on lots of different smartphones coming out every single year. But I don't really know how quick it's going to ramp up, because it seems to be hitting roadblocks that they weren't expecting over the past couple of years. I'd love to see one in my house, but I don't know when it's going to be affordable for that to happen.
Exactly. Grant, what do you think?
Well, I like the technology. I said I like the technology a lot. Excellent contrast ratio, beautiful colors, and and they're paper thin. As we know, since the LG is coming out, I'm positive it won't be long before others. And I have, I think, a better feeling than other people about the Sony one coming out. Let's say I have a good hunch that we will see those in Sony stores by the end of the year. And
really?
The marriage of, and the marriage of 4K and OLED together, that's wonderful. What I thought was funny is the curved OLED screens from both Samsung and LG, which were more we did it because we could sort of a thing. There's no good reason for that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Unless you're sitting directly in front of this curved OLED screen, if you're off to the side to any degree, it's like, why do it? As you say, because we can. Brent, what was your impression of OLED, the state of OLED today?
Well, I'm going to be the in-house old guy and say that.
All right, I'll let you. That's fine.
I'm going to take over for a minute from you, Scott.
All right.
When I got into this business, all of the biggest LCD screens you could buy were that big. Okay. Yeah. And now they're humongous, and they're like $500 or less. And I think this is going to happen because ultimately it is going to be cheaper to produce. It's a great technology. It's going to have a lot of applications outside of the TV world, and both commercial applications, maybe even as clothing, maybe even things we haven't dreamed of yet. So I think it's going to happen, but I really hate to predict when. And these things are going to be so expensive that it's not. Even if somebody ships this year, it's going to matter for reviewers who want to get a copy to review, and for about 10 rich guys. And for the general public,
Right.
it's going to matter in about maybe 5 years.
Yep. I tend to think so. It's going to take a little while, and I think Chris's points are well taken. That the manufacturing is still probably problematic. I've heard upwards of like 90% failure rate for manufacturing at this point. Which, if that's true, they can't possibly make any money at it. But if the manufacturing improves to the point, for example, Panasonic and Sony are both talking about their 4K OLEDs as being made by using basically an inkjet printer, that could end up being real cheap. Don't you think, Chris?
Yes, and I think at some point the manufacturing will obviously catch up and it will be cheap, just like LCD and plasma became. Because we all remember $10,000 42-inch plasma sets that were, 480p and had horrible contrast ratios, and their black level was, really, really high compared to what we see now.
Terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same point, going back to the LG and
Go ahead, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Going back to the LG and Samsung thing, the one big thing with the Samsung and their true RGB OLEDs is that will give you the wider color gamut, whereas LG is having to filter it through colors, which means you're not going to get that same true red, green, and blue. So we're going to get really great contrast ratios, but up until we finally get those RGB OLEDs, we might not get the full true performance benefit of OLED that we're all hoping to see soon.
Well, this brings up the next question that I wanted to address here, which had to do with announcements made by Sony and Panasonic that even their regular TVs, their 1080p high definition TVs, are now going to have an expanded color gamut. In Panasonic's case, it was the ZT60, the new flagship model that was introduced at the show, and the step-down VT60, which that used to be the flagship, but now it's like the second tier, and the ZT60 is the new flagship. Now, I'm sure you guys probably all saw the ZT60 in that little blacked-out room, and what amazing black levels it had. I mean, it's really starting to approach OLED or Kuro territory, as I've said. But the thing that I really want to address here is that both companies said, well, we're going to expand the color gamut out beyond Rec 709, which is the color gamut that's used to create Blu-rays and broadcast TV and just about everything we watch these days. And I said, but you shouldn't expand the color gamut out beyond where it's supposed to be with regard to the content source. And they said, well, the original shot, was shot on a camera that has much wider color gamuts, and then that's brought in to put on Blu-ray or broadcast, and we're just expanding it back out to where it originally was. To which I scratched my head and said, how do you know where those colors originally were? Brent, what was your impression of that whole issue?
Well, I think this is sort of what we saw, remember back when they first introduced the LED projectors with the Runco and the Vivitech and some others, where they had this expanded color gamut, and they didn't have anything really to drive it with, but it let you do some color modes that were pretty, otherworldly if you wanted to be, or just kind of pumped up. And a lot of people like that, and I think that's perfectly fine if you like that. You can be a purist and go for the pure thing, or you can set up one TV to do both. So I think it's actually really cool. And I think in video it's sort of the same as audio. Some people like a pumped up sort of look, and hey, I'm wearing Beats headphones right now, so this is the audio equivalent of wider color gamut.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. Grant, what was your thought on these wider color gamuts when we don't yet have content that is delivered to us in the wider color gamut?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've covered it. Technically, it's kind of impossible to figure that out. How they're going to make it work, and that's similar to the Sharp Quatron, that extra little subpixel that they add on there.
Yep.
The way to look at it, though, is look at the TV, and once you dial it in, what's the result? If it still gives you a killer picture, then the marketing department can say whatever they want. I'm one of the focus on the results.
Right. And did you get into that little sort of black room that they had, Panasonic had in their
Oh,
booth?
the Panasonic. Yeah, that the new ZT line I thought was pretty damn awesome. Can't wait to get one of those in here to try out. And it's interesting how there is a new Panasonic has decided we need a new, even better product line than the VT series, because like last year's VT50 was an awesome television.
Yeah.
And my understanding is the ZT series is going to be priced as a real premium TV. So they're seeing movement in people looking to pay a bit more for something that they can say is really, really good. And in the way that people did with the Kuro, and then Sharp tried with the Elite line. I don't know what the status of Sharp's Elite line is, because they haven't come out with a new one in a while, but it's that same, let's make something, super premium.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, on AVS Forum, I posted a piece about the ZT60 at CES and got a lot of responses, one of which was a guy had actually pre-ordered it from a retailer, I forget who it was, and said he paid $4,100 for I think it was the 60 or 65. That's all the ZT is going to be available in, a 60 or 65. I can't remember which size. I think it was 65 for $4,100, which some people commented was, oh, that's so expensive, blah, blah, blah. But it's really not. For a 65-inch, for a Sharp, you're going to spend probably twice that much. So, it is a premium set, no question. But it really isn't at the same price point that Kuro was when it was around, or that the Sharp Elite is now. Chris, what did you think of the ZT60? You probably liked it too.
Oh, it was one of my favorite things at the show. And I talked to Sony and Panasonic and got the exact same explanation as you, that somehow they can figure out where these colors came from, but they couldn't explain how they would know if it was a color that was pulled in or a color that was supposed to be at that point that they were stretching back out. And so the thing was that Panasonic reassured me that they still have the Rec 709 mode, so you can get the correct colors and still get that phosphor that they introduced. So the black levels I thought were fantastic. The image looked amazing. And to me, it was wonderful, even compared to OLED, because it's something that we can actually go out and buy this year. And most of us could save up to afford if we wanted to.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. Okay. Next, I want to move along to some audio stuff. But before I do, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, which is Netflix. Now, Netflix was at the show, of course, and they were actually showing some demonstrations of streaming 4K, which I actually didn't see, but it certainly shows that they are working on the next generation. In the meantime, you can order and stream as much as you want from their current library of streaming titles, which includes thousands of TV episodes and movies that can be streamed to just about any consumer electronics device you have, be it a TV, Blu-ray player, gaming console, computer, of course, tablet, smartphone, dedicated box like a Roku or a Boxy. Just about all consumer electronics products now have a Netflix app, and you can watch anything you want on any screen you have. You can even start on one device and finish on another. So the ultimate inconvenience is offered by this particular service, all for one low monthly fee. Now, for those few of you who might be watching and haven't tried Netflix streaming yet, you can try it free for 30 days. Just go to netflix.com/twit and give it a try. See what you think. I find it very, very convenient and very useful for finding certain products, programs that I might not be able to get any other way. So it's definitely worth checking out. Go to netflix.com/twit. Okay, now, as far as audio is concerned, we've been talking a lot about video, but I don't want to give audio too much of a short shrift here. You three guys, I think, all went to the Venetian, which is where a lot of the 2-channel audio was, and I'd like to get your impression of what you heard there. I myself was planning to go and didn't make it because I got sick, and I just had to, go back to my hotel room and crash because there was no other choice. But pardon me. So let's start with Chris. You went to the Venetian, I believe, did you not?
I did.
Did you hear much audio, or were you mostly still looking at video there?
I went there mostly for audio, and so the only video I saw actually was a demo with Stewart Film Screen and D-Box and Kaleidoscape. But otherwise, I was there strictly for audio.
Ah, okay. Well, what did you hear that impressed you the most?
The two favorite things that I had for audio there were Teal had their new 1.7 speakers, which they were demonstrating along with some Braced Electronics, and those sounded amazing. It has the metal mid-range woofer that's come down from their 2.7s and 3.7s. And so the 1.7s have gone up to $5,500 a pair, whereas the 1.6s came in at around $2,000 or so when they were last made. But for the $5,000 price, they sounded really fantastic, I thought. And the other thing I really loved, which wasn't at the Venetian but was offsite at a hotel, was the Olive One, which Logitech bought the Squeezebox line of products and has somewhat killed them off now that they don't even make the Touch. But the Olive One is this little $400 circular thing that looks like it was designed by Apple, or it's $400 on its own, $500 with a 1 terabyte hard drive that you can stream all of your music to. It can pull down tracks from Spotify or Netflix with the videos. It has digital and analog outputs. It has a couple 32-watt speaker outputs. And it's just this really well, elegantly designed thing that can aggregate all your music, has a great touchscreen interface, and is something that I'd want to put in pretty much every room of my house so I could listen to music without spending a fortune to put in a multi-room system.
Did that what you're talking about kind of reminds me of Sonos? Does it have sort of a similar appeal as Sonos?
It does have a similar appeal of Sonos. The one area that Sonos hasn't kept up with, to me, is it still only allows CD bitrate, whereas the Olive One, they've made a high-end line of products before this, but this can still do up to 24-bit 192 kilohertz audio. And so you can download those high-res files from HD Tracks or somewhere else. And unlike Sonos, you can also put a hard drive in here to keep all of your music on the device itself instead of needing a computer that's on or to have a network storage device to keep your music on.
Sounds great to me. I'll definitely want to look into that. Brent, I think you went to hear some audio, didn't you?
Yeah, I spent most of my time there, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, well, give us your rundown then.
Well, I got to start by saying the most amazing thing I saw in audio wasn't at the Venetian. It was at the Wynn, where Vizio was showing some new sound bars. And they had 3 new sound bars. You know, but Vizio, I don't think it's any great secret, doesn't make anything. You know, they rely on various manufacturers. So they haven't had what you call an integrated line or anything like that. They showed 3 different sound bars at 3 price points. All of them looked the same. They, you know, some of them were bigger, and they all completely blew me away. They had a 5.1 sound bar with, you know, wireless surrounds and wireless sub for $329, and it sounded like a receiver-based system. It was just amazing. It didn't have any of the normal problems that you get with a sound bar.
Now, this was a sound bar with actual separate physical surround speakers, not virtual surround, right?
Right, but they're wireless, so you don't have to run the wires for them, and that makes it a lot easier to deal with.
You have to plug them in someplace.
You plug them into the subwoofer, actually. So the idea is you put the subwoofer at the back of the room, which, you know, may or may not make much of a difference, and depending on how the soundbar is made. And I was completely blown away. They showed a higher end model that they haven't priced yet that had, you know, what we would term as a real soundbar. It had an 8-inch subwoofer to it that actually shook the seats in the little theater that they had. And on top of that, they had a $99 soundbar that didn't have a subwoofer, just a single bar, you know, that goes with like a 32-inch TV. And it had real bass to it for $99, and also great quality. It was just they did things, you know, I've measured and evaluated almost every soundbar on the market, and they did things that I really didn't think were possible.
Wow. When are they expected to ship? They didn't say, probably.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, I was actually in the Vizio room, but I was looking mostly at the TVs, and I didn't have a chance to get into the soundbar room. And now I'm sorry I didn't, because it sounds like that was a real find.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. What else? What else audio-wise did you dig?
There's a new Krell surround sound processor that they showed at CES, and they showed it more as a theoretical concept than a real product. It was like a black box at CES. It's I think $6,500, but it's still a Krell, and it has balanced outputs. It has auto EQ that's very customizable. In other words, you can set the auto EQ to only work up to a certain frequency, which is the way I think it should be done. It has, the same sort of great sounding digital to analog converters and all that, but they showed the new thing they showed that they hadn't talked about before was the cosmetics. And I couldn't believe how beautifully made it was and how beautifully styled it was. It looked nicer than the $50,000 Krell product.
Well, Krell certainly makes things that are in that $50,000 range. So
yeah.
in a sense, this one's a bargain.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited to get a review sample of this at some point, this spring, I guess.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, that Krell is certainly what you'd call high end, and most of the stuff at the Venetian, I think, is. There probably isn't much in the way of surround sound at the Venetian. Am I right about that?
There's really not much. It's you used to see it a lot years ago, but the high-end audio world has moved mostly back to 2-channel, and I guess that's where that sort of enthusiast is really into it. And also for for a big high-end home theater system, you're going to want to probably pull in a custom installer anyway, and so those products tend to be debuted at CES in September.
Right. Along with projectors, that's one thing that we don't see a lot of at CES. Are projectors. We see much more of that at CEDIA. Grant, what about you? I know you. I think you mostly looked at video, even over at the Venetian. But did you hear any audio at all, or were you not just covering that?
Oh yeah, I did go around to some of the suites in the Venetian, and I particularly like the new golden ear speakers. They were calling, I think, the Triton 7s. I think that was the number. Nice towers with much of the same inner workings as their more expensive ones, but these were only $700 each, per tower, and they sounded really, really good. I think that would be a good speaker for someone who's looking for, some audiophile, great experience, but it just is not gonna, put out nuts kind of money. A number of USB DACs. NAD has a new USB DAC that was pretty good. You see that a lot more in the audiophile world at like the Rocky Mountain show. All the music is coming out of Mac Minis or laptops now through good USB DACs, so there's more of that, and it's getting easy to use. Mm-hmm. A few good sound bars. Paradigm had a sound bar that sounded pretty good. I think I'd seen it before somewhere else. And I spent a lot of time over at the same room that Chris mentioned, where Stewart and D-Box and ADA were set up a big home theater system, and it was fun sitting in the D-Box seat watching segments from Spider-Man and things like that.
I have to tell you, I guess from that you enjoy the D-Box experience.
Well, I've never experienced it for more than 15 minutes at a time, so that's there's a new commercial D-Box theater that just went up in my town a few months ago, so I've got to go look at what movies they're playing and give that a try.
Huh. Those of you who don't know, D-Box is a device, a transducer that you install in your seat, and it's essentially a subwoofer that shakes your seat when big explosions and rocket blast-offs and things like that happen. Personally, it makes me motion sick. And I remember some years ago, Runco was demonstrating their system, and they had D-Box, and I sat down, and as soon as like 10 seconds into the demo, I just got up and left, and I said, I can't handle this. I'm getting motion sick. And so every time thereafter, when I showed up at the Runco booth at CEDIA, they said, "Oh, here, we've got a seat for you. It does not have a D-Box in it." But actually, that's just me.
D-Box doesn't actually use the LFE output. It's not like a butt kicker. What they are, the chair has to be customized with 3 separate actuators, and the D-Box engineers take the Blu-ray disc and sit through the whole thing and segment by segment code the motion effects into it, and then they download the code for that particular movie to your box. So it's not like butt kicker and some other things that basically attach a subwoofer to your chair. This is actually motors that is moving the chair in specific ways for that particular movie. So it's more precise than those other kind of systems you may be thinking of.
Right. Well, that must be what it was then, because literally I got motion sick and kind of nauseous. Chris, do you enjoy the D-Box type experience, or are you like me?
I can say I was not a huge fan of the D-Box experience, but the chairs that we were in were incredibly comfortable, so I was okay with that.
Yeah, well, they probably prevented you from falling asleep because they're moving around like this.
Yeah, I went first thing in the morning, but if I had gone like at 4 or 5 after a long day of walking the floor, a nap in those chairs would have been pretty nice at that point.
Well, speaking about sound bars, Brent, you were talking about sound bars earlier, and I wanted to see if any of you, getting back to the main show floor, actually not. It was, well, there was something in the South Hall, and also did you guys have a meeting with THX? They've started a collaboration with a company called Sontia, and which is a company that has developed an audio enhancement system that they were demonstrating over at the Renaissance, in a suite at the Renaissance, and then they also had a booth in the South Hall. Brent, did you get to hear that at all?
Actually, I heard that at the CES show, the whole Sontia thing and the whole demo, and it's, there's a lot of audio enhancement technologies out there and different pieces of software you can get from all sorts of different people, such as SRS, which is now DTS has one,
right.
Waves audio thing, various others. They all work to some degree. They're all somewhat dependent on the tuning that the engineers do. Odyssey has one as well.
Yeah.
I would argue that none of them work miracles. You still need good transducer design, good basic acoustical design of the product to get great sound. They can make a bad sounding product sound better. They can make a good sounding product sound better. But that demo was a while back that I saw, and wait to hear if they have any real announcements. I do know that they have it in one THX approved soundbar from a company called Teufel, which is in Germany. It's spelled Teufel. But I haven't heard of any design wins as of yet from them, although actually I have a message on my phone from Laurie Fincham at THX that I'm supposed to return. So maybe he's got some news.
That may very well be something. Well, I will tell you this. LG announced a soundbar at the show with this Sontia technology in it. So you may be seeing one sooner than you think.
I didn't know that. I didn't see that. I didn't spend a whole lot of time at the LG booth, unfortunately.
Yeah, the LG booth actually had a number of kind of hidden gems, which I'll get to in a minute. But before we leave the subject of Sontia, I heard the demo in the Renaissance suite, in which they were using some very high-end but unidentified speakers. They didn't have an agreement with the maker of these speakers. They're bookshelf speakers at $10,000 a pair, so they were very expensive. and they were using an Aragon amplifier without this Sontia. It's called SPT, Stable Phase Technology. And then they switched back and forth. And there wasn't very much of a difference. There was a little bit. I wrote in my notes, made soundstage somewhat larger, more transparent. But there was not a large difference. Then I went to the Sontia booth in the South Hall where they had this LG soundbar. And the guy there showed me an A and B with and without, and the difference was more dramatic. So I'm looking forward to trying that LG soundbar myself, because I think it has some potential. Grant, did you see any of this Sontia technology?
Yeah, I saw the same demonstration at the Renaissance, and what struck me is why that they did the demonstration on what's already really good gear.
Exactly.
And then you hear just a smidgen of an improvement. You know, I think the LG demo that you saw where they show it on, you know, budget price gear, and then the difference would be more dramatic. And it's my understanding that it's that type of budget type audio systems that they have in mind. So they're going to come up with a new THX logo. It's not exactly THX certified, but something to specify that this has a a feature on it that say something else doesn't, which should tell you that the audio might be a bit better than something of equivalent price that doesn't have that qualification. And I think it's a good thing, because it's looking at box specs, it's impossible to tell, especially when you're talking about budget price stuff, what's going to sound good and what's not. And those are the type of systems you can never demo in a store, because they're in boxes all up against the wall.
Yeah, yeah. Plus, the store is nothing of an acoustic environment that you'd want that has anything to do with what you're going to have at home.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, to their defense, just to say, THX did have a lower cost soundbar demonstration in that same room that you and I both heard that demo, but it wasn't working when I was there. So
I think I was busy eating the shrimp then anyway.
Yeah, could have been. Could have been. Chris, did you hear it? Did you hear this thing we're talking about?
No, I didn't. I did hear the Vizio soundbars that Brent mentioned earlier, and those were very impressive, I have to say. I would like to get one of those and to see how it sounds, because that was the best soundbar I heard at the show by far.
Great. Fantastic. Well, I'm certainly going to be looking at some soundbars this year, and those are at the top of my list as well. Last question. Did you get into the DTS booth to hear the demo of Headphone X? Chris, did you hear it?
I did not get into the DTS booth, unfortunately. So,
well, it was a little hard because they were pumping music really loud, and they had these sort of go-go dancer types that were a little off-putting to me anyway. Grant, did you hear it?
I was scared off by the go-go dancers. So,
well, sorry. I braved them. Probably mostly because I actually had an interview with Jeff Emmerich, who was the talent at the DTS booth. And this guy is a 50-year recording engineer. He has a 50-year history, including engineering the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's, Revolver, and Abbey Road. So he really knows his stuff. And so I had an interview with him. So I went in and I listened to it. I was pretty impressed. Brent, did you hear it?
I saw those go-go dancers, and I figured there had to be something worth seeing there. So I headed straight to the booth. I headed straight to the booth, and honestly, I'd been told there was a good demo. So I went in, I heard it, and I couldn't believe what I heard. And just to sort of preface this, I used to work for Dolby, and I used to sell Dolby headphone when I was at Dolby.
Right. Which is a very good surround simulator, which is what this is, simulating surround sound in headphones. Dolby headphone works very well.
Yeah. This, though, is a whole nother level. Dolby headphone is probably 12-year-old technology. This is a whole lot better. With Dolby headphone, I was never able to get a really good solid center image. This will give you a good solid center image. It completely blew me away. I really didn't think it was possible to do that. So I'm really heavily and eagerly anticipating what they do with this. But you never know. There's a big difference between the demo and reality. And
well, that's true, and it's not available in any product yet. I mean, I assume they're hoping to license it to one company or another to include in an AV receiver or whatever.
Exactly, and then one of the problems that we have with Dolby headphone is that there was nothing at the time powerful enough to do it.
Right.
Even though it was pretty good, but you needed a big AV receiver to do it. And not that many people plug their headphones into a big AV receiver. So how practical is this? How easy will it be to get it licensed? I don't know. If they can put it in your smartphone, boy, send it on.
Yeah, absolutely. I, too, was very, very impressed. Part of the demo was they played a little track that had a voice saying, right front speaker, center speaker, left front speaker, and they identified each of the speakers, and you listened to the there were speakers in the room, and you took the headphones off and you listened and you heard them, and then they said, okay, now put the headphones on, we'll play the same track. And they played the same track, and honest to God, I had to take my headphones off to make sure that I wasn't hearing those speakers, that those speakers weren't on, which of course they weren't. So I too was extremely impressed with that demo. Okay, well, listen, we've come to the end of a great hour summarizing bunches of stuff that we saw and heard at CES. Brent, what are your final thoughts here? Any conclusions? What are you most looking forward to reviewing this year, or just see you next year?
I am. We didn't even talk about what I spent most of my time covering, which was headphones and personal audio. So I have piles of that stuff coming in for review because there were thousands of new headphones probably introduced at CES, thousands of new Bluetooth speakers. In addition to the sound bars I saw, in addition to numerous new speakers like the Teals and Golden Ears that the guys mentioned, audio was, to me, unbelievable at this show. There was so much new audio gear and there was so much excitement about it that I honestly, for me, in my 20-some-odd years of doing this was my favorite CES ever.
Wow. Well, that's high praise indeed, because you've been to more of them than any of us. And I must admit, a lot of my colleagues, tell me, Brent, what you think about this. Most of my colleagues, when CES is coming up, they say, oh, CES, Vegas, don't want to go, have to go, bah humbug. I myself look forward to it every year. I love going to the show. I love seeing the people. I love seeing the product. I love the over-the-topness of Vegas. Are you with me, or are you with the majority who sort of say, well, I got to go, so I'm going to go?
I'm totally with you. It's a little easier as a freelancer. You don't have quite as much responsibility, so you can kind of go do whatever is interesting to you or whatever you think is going to make you some money.
Yeah, well,
it's just a lot more fun that way. And I think if you take it as, if you say, look, I'm going to go to this thing and I'm going to enjoy myself, it's a whole different thing than I'm going to go to this thing and make 10 million zillion meetings and see every product there is, because you just can't do it.
True enough. Grant, what about you? Do you enjoy CES, or is it something you just have to do?
A little bit of both. I enjoy because I just get into looking at this stuff and talking about it, and seeing people that that I haven't seen for a year. But it's also exhausting, and I was actually even there for several days afterwards. I was there for the entire week because I stayed to take some training with THX later. So it was a long week, and writing my stories at 4 in the morning every day is not the way that I like to spend every week, but it's a good experience to do once a year.
Yeah. Certainly writing stories at 4 in the morning is not my favorite part of it either, but necessary sometimes. Mm-hmm. Chris, how about you? You've only been there a couple of years, so you might not be quite as jaded.
I'm probably not as jaded yet, though I do prefer the a little bit more laid-back nature of CEDIA, where I can walk without 150,000 other people getting into my way and have a more focused show on what I'm actually there to see, and not car audio or forks that measure how fast you're taking bites of your food.
And what was your favorite thing of all?
I like the Panasonic and the Samsung plasmas. I thought they did great jobs getting rid of reflections. The light output's better, so they work better in a living room than plasmas ever have before. And the black levels were far better than they even were last year. I think those are fantastic sets that people can go buy and afford and keep for a long time until OLED finally gets down to practical price points.
I would have to agree that was certainly an extremely important part of the show. You can also follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott. You can email me at scott@twit.tv. And you can read my Q&A column on Secrets of Home Theater and High Fidelity at hometheaterhifi.com. Next week, my guest geek is scheduled to be Johan Allen, a 40-year veteran of Dolby. He's the senior vice president there, who's been in charge of and certainly involved with most of the technological advances that have come out of Dolby over the last 40 years. So we're going to be talking about Dolby Atmos and so much more about Dolby audio technologies, and I sure do hope that you will join me for that. Until then, geek out.